Security breaches and incidents happen despite the security teams trying their best to avoid them worldwide. Thus, digital forensics and incident response, DFIR, has become an essential subject in defensive security. In this video, we will cover some basic concepts of DFIR. When there's been a security incident in your organization, what do? Panic? No, winky face. You follow an incident response process. Different organizations have published standardized methods to perform incident response. SANS has published an Incident Handler's Handbook. The handbook defines the steps as follows: preparation, identification, containment, eradication, recovery, lessons learned. The steps defined by SANS are often summarized as the acronym PISRL, making them easy to remember. Let's learn briefly what the different steps mean. The first step in the incident response process is preparation. One of the most important aspects of responding to an incident is ensuring proper communication and coordination. If you don't have information about who you should call for what, and how you can contact them, then you won't be able to effectively respond. At this stage, you want to gather information such as contact information, which team member within and outside of the organization needs to be involved, and how can they be reached? What is the escalation procedure? Depending on the severity of the incident, you would want to know the proper escalation procedure. Which issue tracking system should you use? Having a centralized issue tracking system that the incident response team can use is important. Where and how can you access needed tools? As an example, which tools are you supposed to use for digital forensics? How can you access those tools? Where and how can you store incident data? As you collect digital forensics, you will need to have a safe place to store that data, and you'll also need to understand the policies of how to handle that type of data. The next step in the process is identification. Identification is about determining whether you've been breached or not. To do this, we need to answer multiple questions, like: who or what reported this event? When did the event happen? How was it discovered? What is the scope of this incident? Does it affect business operations? Once we've run through the identification phase and we've determined that there is a legitimate incident that's either occurred, is actively occurring, or is likely to occur in the near future, we need to move on to the containment phase. Containment buys us more time to figure out what else needs to happen and which steps we need to take, while still protecting the rest of our data and networks. To properly contain a threat, we have to decide what to do. Should we shut down the system entirely? Can we just contain the threat within that system by sandboxing it? Should we disconnect the threat from the main network and air-gap it? What we do depends on the attack vector, the data we have available regarding the threat, whether the system is providing critical services, etc. After we've contained the threat, we can move on to eradicate it. Eradication is the step in which we eliminate the components related to the incident, such as malware installed, closing down the vulnerabilities that caused the incident in the first place, by patching, implementing new firewall rules, etc. The eradication phase is concerned with eliminating the root cause of the breach and the artifacts related to that breach. Right after and/or during the eradication phase, we will start the recovery phase. Recovery is the process of restoring our systems back to being fully functional, but, of course, without still having the vulnerabilities that enabled the breach. This is when we'll want to restore from trusted backups. Ensure that the backups were not infected or compromised with backdoors. Patch and update the systems. Implement specific logging and monitoring to look for additional compromises. Thoroughly test those systems to make sure the vulnerabilities don't still exist, etc. Depending on the scope of the incident, the recovery and eradication phases may be performed at the same time, and/or they may take weeks or months to perform. After we've successfully eradicated and recovered from the incident, we can move on to the lessons learned phase, also known as the post-incident activity, or the post-mortem. This is all about learning and improving. Because an incident occurred, that means there was an issue somewhere that allowed the incident to happen. What can we learn from it, and how can we make sure it doesn't happen again? If a different incident occurs in the future, how can we better respond that time? What did we do well and what didn't we do well? Etc. That's what the lessons learned phase is all about. This phase should involve reports, documentation, and meetings with the teams involved in the incident process and anyone else who might benefit. Those meetings should conclude with action items that can be implemented to improve the organization's readiness and ability to respond to incidents in the future.